couple of swearing-ins tonight. So, Chief, you want to start?
Yeah. The first one will be Jerry Cooper. He was formerly one of the captains with the fire department, and we recently promoted him to assistant chief. And he's on a 40-hour week, and he takes care of a lot of the administrative stuff. Where when Carol retired, we inherited a lot of her work. So between him and I, we keep the place running. So there's Jerry. Yeah.
If you want to, we got a camera. Got it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Ready? Are you ready? Raise your right hand. I,
Gerald Cooper,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will uphold and support
that I will uphold and support
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and the bylaws and resolutions of Sycamore Township.
the bylaws and resolutions of Sycamore Township.
I will faithfully and vigorously discharge
I will faithfully and vigorously discharge
the duties incumbent upon me
the duties incumbent upon me
as a firefighter for the Sycamore Township,
as a firefighter for Sycamore Township,
so help me God.
so help me God. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thanks, Chief.
Chief, you want to get in and we'll get a picture? Cooper, by all means. You get right back. This way?
Everybody on one leg?
Okay, good. Good? So, Chief, you want to...
Yeah. Our next swearing in will be Thomas Swimley. He's been a part-timer with the fire department since 2007, and we just hired him as a full-time employee. Welcome, Thomas.
Ready? Yep. Raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Tom Swimley,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will uphold and support
that I will uphold and support
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United
the
States,
Constitution of the State of Ohio,
the Constitution of the State of
and the
Ohio,
bylaws and resolutions of Sycamore Township.
bylaws and resolutions of Sycamore Township.
I will faithfully and vigorously discharge
I will faithfully and vigorously discharge
the duties incumbent upon me
the duties incumbent upon me
as a firefighter for Sycamore Township.
as a firefighter for Sycamore Township.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Are we lined up okay?
You're perfect.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's been around. Next month, 9 more, we'll be done.
Before we get going, if any of you want to leave, you probably do.
Long time.
Okay, next on the agenda is approval of minutes, November 16th special meeting and December 6th. We'll do November 16th first. Do we have a motion?
Have a motion to approve. Have a second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Mr. Porter?
Mr. LaBarbera?
Aye.
Mr. Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Weedman?
Aye. We also have a meeting December 6th, those minutes for approval. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second? I will second. Any further discussion?
Yes. So my objections, corrections for the meeting minutes of December the 6th, 2018. First page, 1 minute, 10-second timestamp. I would like the record to reflect the following. This goes back to the Ohio checkbook discussion in regards to a demonstration on how the Ohio checkbook works from our April 2018 meeting and our last meeting of December the 6th. Mr. LaBarbera said what you were arguing about is the data went to Columbus. It didn't. It went from a business office, Debbie Campbell's, to Administrator Greg Bickford's office computer to show the Ohio checkbook works. It was a major point of contention with this group. How controversial? I refer you to the workshop meeting of April 17th, where you can hear our fiscal officer, Bob Porter's behavior. That line is not in the township meeting minutes, but it is in the Ohio Treasurer's notes. My fellow trustees say the minutes were already approved. It only takes 2 to approve the minutes. The ORC says minutes need not be taken verbatim, but should include statements of each trustee, especially if controversial. This indeed was controversial. I'd like the record to show that on page 100 of the updated Ohio Sunshine Laws, under the Ohio Open Meetings Act, contents of meeting minutes states, minutes are inadequate when they contain inaccuracies that are not corrected from the meeting. First page, 3 minute 49 second timestamp. In reference to the November 1st, 2018 meeting, where his statements meaning LaBarbera's statements, were not included in the minutes. LaBarbera also noted that details regarding the motion on the cable franchise access fee reduction from 5% to 3% like our neighbor Blue Ash were not included in the minutes. To correct the minutes, all you had to do was add the line like our neighbor Blue Ash. First page, 4 minute 30 second timestamp. LaBarbera continued his statement saying the Parks and Recreation Committee should perhaps have an alternate person to conduct meetings if the park director is unavailable to attend. The next line should be included. The last meeting was held in June. That is half the year. Include the word perhaps. My actual statement was perhaps we need a backup person in case he can't conduct meetings. First page, 5 minute timestamp. He noted that on October the 4th, the meeting minutes should include Law Director Miller's statement about the process for purchasing property. Mr. Miller said, trustees have an executive session, come out and vote in public. In the vote or resolution, it is then public knowledge. I want that line added because that statement is important. This has not always been the case. Mr. Bickford said this process has revolved in the past. Trustees, this is the line, trustees have an executive session, come out and vote in public. In the vote or resolution, it is then public knowledge. It's that line. In the past, this wasn't always the case, and I made reference to it going back to Taco Bell and other property purchases. And I just like to thank you.
Okay. Your objections are so noted. I'd like to address your objections. Mr. LaBarbera, in the spirit of transparency, I'd be willing to vote to enter your Ohio checkbook remarks into the minutes, but before I do, I want to make a comment regarding this subject. For months now, you have voted not to approve minutes because the trustee meeting minutes didn't address the discussion that ensued between Ms. Marcy Longenecker of the Ohio Treasurer's Office and our fiscal officer, Rob Porter, in a workshop on April 17th. I believe that you have totally mixed up the workshop meeting and the April 17th meeting with the trustees on April 5th. In the Thursday trustee meeting, Ms. Bowen came and spoke to us about Ohio checkbook and wanted our approval to go live on their site. In her presentation, she said that we had already uploaded all of the 2017 data to the Ohio Treasurer's Office, and they had the data and were ready to go live until Debbie Campbell called her and told her not to use it. I then proceeded to ask Ms. Bowen the question, do you mean, and I quote, do you mean to tell me that you already have all of our 2017 data in Columbus? End quote. She replied, yes. I asked that question because I did not understand that we had released any information and were still in the process of redacting certain information as requested, or as required by law. A subsequent follow-up with Debbie in the morning proved that what Ms. Bowen told us the night before the meeting was completely false. In fact, Ms. Campbell never talked to or even knew who Ms. Bowen was. Ms. Longenecker was not even at the trustee meeting that night. She came 2 weeks later to our subsequent workshop meeting. At that meeting, Ms. Longenecker stated that Ms. Bowen misspoke about the 2017 data, which engaged Mr. Porter in a disagreement with her about Ms. Bowen's lack of transparency. Ms. Longenecker was defending her employee just like Mr. Porter was defending his employee. After researching the situation in subsequent days, it became clear that what Ms. Bowen told us at the trustee meeting was completely false and lacked all transparency, which is ironic because the Ohio Checkbook Program is all about transparency. Your argument has been that we did not include Ms. Longenecker's comments in our trustee meeting minutes when she never attended the trustee meeting to begin with. You have mixed up the two meetings completely. So, Mr. LaBarbera, I would like to ask all of those that were in attendance at those two meetings if they remember what happened the way you describe it, or if my version of what happened is accurate. Then, I'm happy to approve the minutes next month and that reflect the record of the entire body of this discussion on the topic. That would allow us to truly be transparent on this subject. So, I would ask Mr. Connor, do you were at both meetings, so can you tell us what version you understood?
I understood the description that you just gave as the events as they happened.
Okay. Mr. Miller?
I do not remember the women's names, but the woman from the treasurer's office that was there at the Thursday night meeting definitely said that they had the information in Columbus, and Debbie Campbell had called and told her not to put it on. Then Ms. Longenecker, I think, at the next workshop meeting came in and said she had misspoken. That's when the words between Mr. Porter and Ms. Longenecker took place. So, I mean, that's what happened.
Okay. Mr. Porter?
I concur. For some reason, Mr. LaBarbera wants to continue to harp that I lost my temper or ranted, or however he wants to describe it. The situation was, I was trying to defend an employee of mine that somebody came in here and said willfully violated the will of this board by sending material to the treasurer's office, an open checkbook, which I knew did not occur, and I confirmed the next morning did not occur. And I just, I was defending my employee, and I will not apologize for that. And when somebody accuses one of my employees of doing something they did not do, and then tries to backtrack on it in a workshop meeting 2 weeks later, where she wasn't even at the meeting where we all heard that, that's when I become upset. I will not apologize for defending my employees, and that's what happened.
So, Mr. Porter, your answer is which version did you understand?
I agree with your version.
Thank you. Mr. Bickford, you were at both meetings?
Yeah, that's the way I recall. I even recall sitting right here saying that it was news to me that it was submitted to Columbus. And I asked Deb, I said, did you submit this to Columbus the next day? And she said, we did not submit it to Columbus. And she didn't even know I forget the first woman's name, didn't even know who she was. So I had Debbie verify that, so the data was not sent to Columbus.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Collins, I think you were at both of those meetings as well.
I remember it the way that you described it, and I asked Debbie Campbell in the morning, first thing in the morning, if that's what was happening. She told me that she did not know or had ever talked to him.
Okay. Mr. Holbert, I don't know, were you at both meetings?
I was.
Yes. And what is your recollection?
I agree with Mr. Miller in the way he broke it down. I think that's a complete outline of the events. I don't recall the names either. I remember Marcy. I couldn't tell you her last name, but that's the way I recall it.
Okay, thank you. Let the record reflect that all of the people present at both meetings, Mr. LaBarbera is alone in his version of the events that occurred, and all the other members of the staff heard something totally different. If we're going to report this in the minutes, it is important to be accurate to facilitate maximum transparency. We've been lectured by Mr. LaBarbera over the past 12 months about how we are doing everything wrong when it comes to minutes, and frankly, everything else as well. He continues to say that the ORC dictates what should and should not be in the minutes, and usually does this with special emphasis on, and I quote, especially if the subject is controversial. I want to address Mr. LaBarbera's continual comments that the ORC specifically states what should be included in the minutes. In Mr. LaBarbera's objections to the August 2nd meeting dated September 6th, his third paragraph reads, and I quote, ORC 507.04, minutes need not be taken verbatim, but items should include statements of each trustee, especially if controversial. So I went to section 507.04, and it's important I read this. The heading is Personal Attendance at Board Meetings, Request for Copies of Township Records. A, the Township Fiscal Officer shall keep an accurate record of the proceedings of the Board of Township Trustees at all of its meetings and all of its accounts and transactions, including acceptance of the bonds of Township officers. The Township Fiscal Officer shall personally attend at least one meeting of the Board during each quarter of every year, unless prevented by the occurrence of an emergency from attending. Item B, in any township where the Township Fiscal Officer does not keep the township records in a public facility, the Board of Township Trustees, once each quarter of each year, may request the Fiscal Officer to provide the Board with copies of township records for its review. If the Board makes such a request, it shall tell the Township Fiscal Officer, which records it, wants copies by indicating the dates or types of the records it is requesting. A request made under this section does not diminish any trustee's right to inspect township records under Division B of Section 149.43 of the Revised Code. That is the complete, I read the complete Section 507.04. And I'd just like to get a show of hands. How many people heard in there what's supposed to be in the minutes? Anybody? I'm just curious. The reason you didn't is because it isn't in there. Contrary to what Mr. LaBarbera told us, it is not in there. Mr. Miller, I asked you to do the research, to research the statements that Mr. LaBarbera has continued to make regarding the ORC and what it says should be included in the minutes. Could you please educate all of us on what the ORC actually says on this subject?
Well, the Ohio Revised Code does not say what the minutes are supposed to consist of, merely that you are supposed to have minutes. There is nothing in the code, so I did do some research. I think probably the leading case on this is a Supreme Court case, White versus Clinton County Board of Commissioners. It's a little off from our situation because this was a case that was dealing with the county and they have a different statute that says some other things. But the gist of the court's decision, in a footnote, the Supreme Court says the word minutes is not defined in the Revised Code. Further, the court did go on to say, we recognize that it's not the business of this court to micromanage the public record-keeping procedures. Accordingly, we refrain from laying down specific guidelines other than to dictate that for public records maintained under 121.22 and 305.10, 305.10 is the county statute that they were discussing in the case. Full and accurate minutes must contain sufficient facts and information to permit the public to understand and appreciate the rationale behind the relevant public body's decision. So there is supposed to be enough information in the minutes as far as the discussion so that you can tell how or why somebody voted the way they did, which I think I rendered this opinion probably about 9 months ago. Also, there's nothing in the code that talks about the minutes. In an effort to put this to bed, I would hope Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, I don't recall if there was a statement made that the information went from Debbie's office to Greg's office, which seems to be what Mr. LaBarbera is asking for.
It's on the video and the audio.
But, and if it is, it is, let's put it in, but let's put in everything.
Yes.
So that it's all clear as to what happened either that evening of April 4th, was it?
We're not talking about, my reference hasn't been to the night, my reference has been to the meeting where Mr. Porter went ape crazy. And in that meeting, what was said was that what they were arguing about, and I brought it up, she brought it up, that the data went to Columbus, it didn't, it went from a business office, Debbie Campbell's, to Administrator Greg Vick's office. Computer to show that Ohio checkbook works. That was it. I wasn't referencing the night she was here. I was referencing that.
Okay.
That's what I was referencing.
Okay, that
And
may
that
be
was
true,
indeed
but let's get it all in.
That's
And
why
we will have it all.
we put this in also.
Let's stay on the subject of minutes. Mr. LaBarbera, I'd like to address your objections for the November meeting dated December 6th. Mr. LaBarbera, if you're going to quote me, don't make the quote up. I did not say that you were reckless. I said you were reckless with the facts. Your false statements lacks all transparency. Mr. LaBarbera,
This was said.
I have the floor. I interrupt you and you won't interrupt me. Mr. LaBarbera, as it relates to your last paragraph where you state, I am not pleased with my fellow trustees, Dennis and Tom. We don't share the same definition of transparency, and I've been told every month for the past year it only takes 2 to approve the minutes. For the record, we are not pleased with you either, because your self-serving definition of transparency is a fake and a fraud. And I will address that later in the meeting under trustee comments. And for the record, Mr. LaBarbera, I went back through all the audio while working out at the gym, and I could not find one single time that anyone told you that it, quote, it only takes 2 to approve the minutes. You are not being transparent when you make that claim. That is 100% false. Now, if you're referring to the kindergarten math that 3 minus 2 equals 1, that is rather obvious. But do not accuse anyone of telling you, quote, every month for the past year that it only takes 2 votes to approve the minutes, end quote. Because that is an outright lie and lacks all transparency. So to get back on track with the approval of minutes, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Porter, will you make the roll, please?
I'm not done. The comments in the meeting that I just, besides this, I said perhaps, the word perhaps, that changes the whole line of the sentence on page 4, the 30-second time, the 1 minute 30-second time period. When I said about the Parks Recreation Director.
I'm not talking about the Parks and Recreation Director. I said
You're
nothing.
my integrity in this.
I said nothing about that.
And wait, first of all, how many does it take? How many votes does it take to approve the minutes? How many?
It takes 2,
It
and no
takes
one has
2.
ever told you that, Mr. LaBarbera.
Yes,
no
you
one
did.
has ever told you. I
You
went
do
through
it.
every audio.
It's a fact, but it's the fact that takes 2 to do the minutes.
Mr. Porter, roll call, please.
Mr. LaBarbera?
No.
Mr. Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Weedman?
Aye. In an effort to be transparent, I would suggest that we include Mr. LaBarbera's objection regarding the Ohio checkbook situation, along with the complete discussion of this topic in this evening in the minutes. Those minutes should also include the comments by me regarding the subject and the note that after feedback from staff, Mr. LaBarbera was the only person that was in attendance at both meetings that subscribes to the version he has presented.
But that was a different meeting we were talking about. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the meeting where he went ape crap, going nuts over everything with Marcy for no
Ms.
reason.
LaBarbera, I object to that
Well,
characterization.
Stop it.
It happened, there
Stop
were
it.
people here who were there.
Comments from residents. Greg?
I'm gonna assume everybody down to Jim Steggy is for the zoning hearing, so, first on the list is John Abraham. If that's incorrect and you wanna speak again from zoning, please let me know. No.
At the previous meeting, I was quite taken aback by something. I don't see this in the business world. I'm an industrialist. We manufacture. I employ people, I fire people. I have a lot of work to do. This is typically because it's certainly boorish and in much of the business world, borderline illegal, as it violates human resource confidentiality and often subject to personnel lawsuits. Perhaps in the business of government, standards in the law are more lax. Discussing a specific employee's compensation or justification thereof in public is pathetic and mean. You propose an educational condition as a precondition to a modest salary increase, previously reviewed and budgeted per township procedures. The manner in which you presented this objection, Mr. LaBarbera, concerning the compensation adjustment gave little indication that you were interested in improving the capabilities of this employee to the benefit of township residents. Embarrassment and vindictiveness as a management style does little to motivate an employee. If you were truly interested in the improved performance of the employee, your approach would have been more professional and certainly not a public spectacle. But that horse has left the barn. I looked up the qualifications of the employee on public sources. 3 years at UC Engineering, go Bearcats. Cincinnati State, associate degree in civil engineering, technology, architectural, construction management, and surveying majors. Bachelor of Science Liberal Arts at Xavier University, concentration on organizational management. Now the trustee who was making this accusation and making this suggestion in public, as I pointed out, went to Allegheny College, got a business degree, a Bachelor of Science degree in education, religion, and philosophy. University of Cincinnati, go Bearcats, you were down there when I was there, getting a master's in broadcast management. Us guys in engineering used to call it the School of Rock. I know you have previously objected to other trustees schooling you, but I am sincerely concerned about the culture here in the township offices after this employee incident. Let me read you a quote. The program prepares you for leadership roles in managing people and building employee capabilities. As human capital is increasingly recognized as a competitive advantage, leading firms are focusing more on talent acquisition and development, leadership training, and culture shaping. This is a quote from the Master of Arts of Human Resources at the University of Cincinnati. So since we're in the mode of telling employees or trustees what improvement they need to justify their salary, I have the phone number and email address of Michael Wagner, PhD, Director of the Master of Arts in Human Resources at the University of Cincinnati College, Linder College of Business. You, sir, can sign up for that course, and I've got the contact information right here for you. Maybe that would improve our attitudes about this stuff and quit doing this in public to employees. I am quite disappointed.
Great, who's next?
Tom James.
I'll pass right now. I'm afraid I might get yelled at. There's a level of hostility in the room, I think. So I'll save mine for a future meeting. Thank you.
Next, R. Gould. It's hard to read.
That's me, but I wasn't going to say anything.
He already,
Oh, okay, all right. Jack Flume.
Jack Flume, 7541 Osbrook Road. I think I just broke something. It's not the only thing that's broken apparently in this room. I just have a question. I was looking at the agenda, and my expectation, and the primary reason I'm here, is to be present when the board considers the resolution relating to the appointment of an ad hoc committee for the land use plan and the zoning resolution. I don't see it on the agenda.
Yeah, I don't think
Is
we're
that a
quite there
report
quite yet.
that Harry's gonna make? or-
Jack, it's not there yet. Harry and I are going through kind of how we're gonna lay out the criteria, and then we're gonna put it out to the public for them to submit, and then we'll present it.
Well, yeah, I understand that, but I thought in order to put out criteria and for the public to respond, don't we have to have a resolution first?
I believe not for,
Otherwise, what are we gonna respond to?
not for an ad hoc committee. This is something that Mr. Holbert's gonna come up with as far as the committee goes. When we created the Land Use Advisory Board 15 years ago, it was a similar situation where I had put together the criteria and put that out there, and this would be something
Oh,
similar.
yeah, I understand, I know exactly, I think I
Jack,
was on,
I think they voted to do that at whatever workshop it was.
That was a
Put
workshop.
together-
That's
put
correct.
together.
doesn't have to be formalized before the Board of Trustees in a regular meeting?
Once they get a group together, I mean, there are suggestions made, but they don't do a resolution.
That wasn't my, well, that's my question, and so now I have a different understanding. Maybe, maybe if the minutes were
Well, I
clear,
mean, we could, but the point is, they already gave them the direction to put the group together. They'll make recommendations, and the board can decide if they want to
Fine,
appoint somebody. or
okay,
not.
that's fine, but again, speaking of communications and understanding, I think I'm not the only person in the audience who's here for a purpose. One of the purposes is to deal with and understand this ad hoc committee, which is pretty important and pretty critical as far as we're concerned on this thing. So if you're gonna do it differently, I mean, I guess that's okay, as long as we finally get to a conclusion that we have an ad hoc committee that deals with the land use plan update and deals with the quote-unquote pause in the red line zoning resolution.
I think we already agreed on that, and I think basically what you might be asking for is, when can we expect that to be put into place?
I expected it today, tonight.
Yes.
Yeah.
To be a resolution, and I think we voted as a board to
Correct.
authorize Harry and Greg to put together the
Okay, so that's been
committee.
a month ago, more than a month ago. And does it take that long?
Yeah, we're not there
To
yet.
put together criteria
That's
for
correct.
that?
We're not there yet and ready to release it out so we can start accepting applications.
Okay, well, let the record show that I personally submitting my application for membership on the ad hoc committee.
Okay, appreciate that.
Good job.
Harry, you want to address that?
Yeah, so here's what I've done. I've reached out to adjoining communities to bring everything together, the ideas that they've put in place, the things that were successful, the things that were not successful. I'll accumulate all those and then come up with standards or requirements that we're looking for this position, for these positions to be filled. And the reason, and I agree with you, Jack, it is important. So we want to make sure that we do have qualified people that help us, and we want to make sure that we have people from each area. So we want to get somebody from the north, we want to get somebody from the south. The south, I was actually just talking to another administrator today in regards to maybe having subcommittees, one from the north, one from the south, and then they basically have meetings for each area, so that the north is going to have different things that are important to them than what the south would in Sycamore Township, okay? So it's important that we get the view from everybody separately and then bring all those together to the main committee and then put that in front of zoning commission and board of trustees. So it's not something I'm going to rush through just because you want to be on the board. We're going to put it out there. We're going to want minimum qualifications. We're going to want the best land use plan that we can put together. I'm not going to rush it because somebody wants to get on the board. You are very well qualified. You're probably one of the top candidates as a resident in Sycamore Township, but Sycamore Township is a huge community. It involves businesses and residents and professionals and just people that are interested in making our community the best it can be. So give us some time, don't rush us, and we will make sure that we publicize this in every way possible, because one of your complaints at all of our meetings is we don't do a very good job of publication. And I take offense to that because I know better. I've tracked all of this in other communities. I've reached out to the city of Cincinnati, which you refer to in every one of your discussions, that they do this and they do that. We're doing everything we can, Jack, to make sure that our community is aware of everything that we're doing. I want you involved. I want them involved. I want every resident in Sycamore Township to give me their thoughts on our zoning resolution. Who did we get? 3 to 5 people every meeting. We put it in the paper. And again, I'm saying all this all over again, and I say it every meeting. Jack, we're going to do everything we can to make sure this is as public as it possibly can and get the response from all of our community, not just a select few that have an agenda, but we want everybody's input. Does that answer your question?
No, I respectfully disagree with Greg, Harry, with the comments I think that Tom made. I respectfully disagree, and the reason is because you have I believe that you have the process backwards. We should appoint the committee and get the ad hoc committee in place and let them, instead of you as an individual, instead, you have broad shoulders. Why should you carry that burden on your shoulders and then present it and then have to defend it a month from now or 6 weeks from now or 8 weeks from now?
That's not how we're doing it.
Well, I know, and that's the problem. That's why I respectfully disagree. We should have the committee of citizens set up first and let the citizens of that committee determine what the best process is. If it's Anderson Township's process, if it's the city of Cincinnati, if we can learn from Sharonville, who is just beginning this process incidentally, and we should talk to them perhaps, but let our citizens of the township determine what path we need to follow instead of you shouldering that burden, or instead of Greg having to take the minutes and do all that. I think that we have it backwards. We should appoint the committee, get them going, and have a legitimate planning process that will involve citizens, but will involve citizens because the citizens are doing it in the first place. That's my nickel's worth of comment here, Harry. You're gonna take a month or 2 months or 8 weeks to do what you're trying to do, and meanwhile, you're trying to do the work of the citizen of your job. You have Columbia Township to worry about. Why take that extra task on your back? Let us, as a group, do that for you and come to you and work with the staff and develop that process. It's very open. Tom's been using the word transparency. Somebody must have shown you the dictionary, so I was starting to count how many times you used it.
Well, I'll use it again.
And we could have a very transparent process. Instead of being told what the process is gonna be, let the citizens determine the process.
Jack, that's why we have elected officials, and elected officials give us all jobs, and then they describe what our jobs should be. One of my jobs is to create the standards for the land use committee. It's not a board, it's a committee. It'll be a committee of volunteers that participate in the review of an already existing land use plan. So, to be honest, and my credentials are always being checked and reviewed, you need residents who understand the land use plan. Wait, let me finish. I know you're just dying here, Jack.
Yeah.
But we need people to understand our zoning resolution, first of all. And that's important, because if they don't understand the zoning resolution itself, as cumbersome as it is a very good document that just needs tweaking. You were the author of the first one, right? We're critiquing that. We're going through it and trying to make it as simple as possible.
Wait a minute. Man, we're talking apples and oranges here. You're talking about going through the zoning code. He's talking about the land use.
No. What I'm talking about is the process in which they need to
I thought
understand
the
that.
point was put a committee together to
It
work
is.
on the land use plan.
It is, that's correct.
That's the process.
The zoning resolution is related, but the ad hoc committee, Tom, when we were in the workshop, and I understood it, is primarily land use, because we gotta do the land use plan before we can have a
Well,
legitimate zoning.
and let me point out 2 things. The first as far as the current update of the zoning code, that's not necessarily being put on pause, because what we said was we're gonna look at that from the technical standpoint.
Technical standpoint.
So as far as an overall, you know, redoing the whole code, no, that's, you know, that's not being done, but I believe we're pushing forward with the current update only because we really, there's some problems
Yeah,
in
there
the
are.
code.
There's some
And
legitimate technical problems.
those need to get fixed.
We had the last meeting, the zoning commission met Monday night, wasn't it? And we finished the last chapters, 24, and Harry now, now this is another burden that Harry carries. Harry carries, that's what.
No pun intended, right?
Yeah, Carrie has another connotation also, Harry carry. But, I lost my train of thought for a minute, but what we're gonna do is Harry now has to pick it up, because he's got this huge data, this huge spreadsheet, and figure out what he's gonna do next. Meanwhile, we should be
And
working
Harry
on-
hasn't even gotten my comments
I
on
know.
it yet, so.
So what we should be doing is to getting ourselves back on the track, concentrating on the land use plan, and let the zoning thing kind of sort itself out, the technical questions, and use the citizens to establish a citizen-oriented process.
And I think that's what the trustees all agreed to do
Yeah,
at
so why
that
is
workshop.
Harry then gonna spend the next 6
Well,
weeks?
This has been since November of 2015.
It needs to get moving. I will say that. I will also point out, when we talk about this committee and that committee, and now we're talking about subcommittees and this subcommittee and that subcommittee,
Isn't that grand?
the definition of a camel is a horse that was designed by committee.
You know,
So,
but a camel's a pretty good animal, actually,
well,
providing that it's
don't need one
operating
around
within-
here.
within its environment.
Let's get a racehorse and get this done instead of a camel.
That's my point, and that's why I respectfully disagree with this measured situation that Harry's talking about. I'm sure that he can do that well, but it loses time, and it reverses the process.
We need to get committee.
I've done comprehensive planning all over the Midwest. I've done it in Scotland, Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates. We're doing it backwards. We're not allowing the citizens to get their 2 cents worth in early, and to let the citizens, with guidance from Harry and Greg.
Jack, nothing, as far as I know, nothing's been done on the land use plan, so everybody can get their 2 cents in. I think what I'm hearing, and I'm trying to bring this to a conclusion, is we need to get this committee together.
Yeah, that's right.
So they can start working on
And
it.
don't
But
make
at the
Harry-
same time,
don't make
we're
Harry-
not pausing on the technical corrections.
I understand
to the
that,
zoning.
and that's well understood, and there's no problem with that. But while Harry does his 14 jobs that he's got to do every day, take one of them away and let us, the citizens, get started with the ad hoc committee, instead of waiting for 6 weeks or 8 weeks.
I'm still of the opinion, I think what we did at the workshop was that we authorized Harry and Greg to recruit members to form that committee. I still think we want them to do that.
Well, then let's do it.
Yeah, I agree. That's the next step, is that we need to send out.
We're working on it.
Applicate, you know,
We
an
are working
application
on it,
process.
and we
for
will
people
make
to
it a
be-
top priority,
recommend.
right, Harry?
Well, again, with all due
Stop
respect,
doing everything I'm doing, and I will work on it, which I'm kind of doing, Jack. Like I said, I was speaking to communities today and getting their feedback. I sent out an email this week to 23 different township cities, county agencies, and so on, to say, what have you found to be successful in forming these committees?
Harry, okay, that's great, but the committee should be doing that.
Why?
Not you, because
Why
the
should a
committee
committee
is
of
charged, will be
people-
charged with developing a citizen-oriented, collaborative process for land use. You're doing the job, part of the job of the
Come on,
committee.
guys. Get the committee together.
Let's move on.
Yeah,
We've got the board's direction, we will take it.
Okay, so
can we put a time frame on
Harry
this?
and Greg, can we get together on, maybe focus on a time frame?
Yeah,
Harry and I will get a time frame out tomorrow to everybody,
Okay, that's perfect.
and that's what we're gonna go with, and we're gonna move from there.
all right,
perfect.
good. Thank you, John.
Anything
I
else?
apologize for interrupting, but
No,
we're getting nowhere.
You've been interrupting me all my life. So I'm used to it. Thank you, thank you.
we're getting nowhere.
Great.
I have Josephine McLaughlin. And
No, we're
No.
just visiting.
Just visitors,
My
okay.
son's
awesome.
in Scots, it's citizenship in the community.
Oh,
You should
great.
get 2 badges for this meeting.
It's our first time.
Might want to go back.
That's all I had. That's it.
Sheriff, patrol report,
Nothing to report, sir.
sir. EMS and fire, chief.
I will email you the year-end report, the December's report to you. Our end result was, our total runs were 4,394. So we are 6 runs within 4,400. Versus 2017, we were 4,202. So we went up almost 200 runs. The only other thing I have is that we had a meeting on the new ambulance, a pre-construction meeting, and we should be expecting that somewhere around the end of March, the 1st of April. And everything went very well with that. They're starting to put together now. And the Lucas devices that you guys approved last meeting, the CPR devices,
Yes.
we got them in, we had our training with them, and they used on 2 people already.
Really? That's
So
awesome.
they're
That's great.
getting used, and they work wonderfully.
That's great.
Very, very wonderful. So, that's all I got.
Okay, any questions? Mr. Bickford, we have a recreation report.
No, I spoke to Mike today, he's putting together the band list per your request, and I think he'll hopefully have that at the next workshop meeting.
Okay, thank you. Maintenance report, Mr. Kellums.
The other things I have since Tuesday is Jake Gamble was successfully receiving his CDL, so 1 trip, 1
Beautiful.
pretty good. We're also preparing for this weekend, anywhere from a dusting to 10 inches, so who knows what's gonna happen. Depends on who you listen to. The only other thing I met with FIDA Freightliner and also with Henderson Equipment Tuesday after our meeting, and we have resolutions tonight later on for the purchase of a truck and equipment.
Okay, any questions? Law Director report. Okay, thank you. Administrator report, Mr. Bickford.
Let me just catch up here. The other thing I want to just tell the board is, we're getting some calls from some residents on the aggregation program, how they're talking about being double billed for electric and gas. On your bill, if you are an aggregation customer, you will have 2 charges. One is from Duke Energy for the delivery of the product, the gas, the electric, and one is a generation charge. It will be 2 different numbers, but the actual kilowatt hours or cubic feet of gas will be the same. That is standard, so people are not being double billed, so just make you aware of that. And also too, I'll harp on this because it's happening again, we will never visit your house and ask you to join our program. We will never say, come door to door, never call you about your account, so please do not give out your account information, and we will never contact you about it. Please pass that along to your neighbors. A lot of people are getting switched to different providers, and the rates are triple what the market rates are, so please keep that in mind.
Okay. Planning and zoning, Harry.
Nothing to report.
Okay. Communications, Mr. Porter.
No communications.
There's no old business, new business zoning case 2018-19P2. Do we have a motion?
We do have a motion. First of all, let me say that I will concur with the testimony this evening, that we have a very unique situation there to deal with, a very challenging location, someplace that has been the cornerstone of the township for a long time. And I applaud everyone's efforts to try and modernize that location and do something positive with it. And I think you will come up with a good plan. So I would like to make a motion to direct the law director to prepare a resolution approving the application subject to the following conditions. The first 3 are the ones from the zoning commission recommendation. That there be a maximum of 2 building signs compliant with the current zoning resolution. 1 monument sign approved as presented, placed a distance of 5 feet from the right-of-way, and that the applicant must submit confirmation from Hamilton County that no additional right-of-way must be dedicated on either the Montgomery or Kimmel Road sides of the development. And I would add also that the materials used be a minimum of 50% stone, and that all mechanicals will be 100% screened.
Can I ask a question? You said something about complying with the zoning code. Did you mean?
No, I said complying with the zoning commission recommendations.
Okay, I thought you
I'm
said.
just,
Planning and zoning commission.
no, the first three conditions are
They're
identical.
to comply with those.
Those are the zoning commission recommendations, recommendations that they approved. So it's those three plus minimum 50% stone and screening of mechanicals.
2 buildings. Or was that part of it?
That was part of the zoning commission's three.
Okay,
I'll get them.
we have a motion, do we have a second?
Give a second.
Okay, motion
No,
and second.
before you call the roll, help us out. You said mechanicals 100% screened, from where? So if you say they're 100% screened, that means if we walk up on the roof, they have to be screened.
Now,
You want from right of way, which is our standard.
yes, screened as per our existing code. Yeah.
Okay, clarification, any further discussion? I just want to add that this is a really huge improvement to that corner. We're excited to have it. We're excited to have 2 great names coming to that corner, and we hope that everything is real successful. I know it's a tight squeeze on that corner. It's always been a tight squeeze, even with the existing building you have. But we're looking forward to great things on that corner. So we're happy that you brought that into us.
And I would also thank the Skaggy family for their cooperation in working with us through these many years on the use and applications that have been in that corner.
Not gonna lie with everybody, congratulations. Looks, it's been going great.
Mr. Porter.
Mr. LaBarbera,
Aye.
Mr. Connor,
Aye.
Mr. Weedman.
Aye. Next item is resolution setting the rate of pay for a new hired township employee, Mr. Miller.
Yeah, this is for a new firefighter swinger. Resolution setting the rate of pay for a newly hired township employee. This is the rate.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and second, any further discussion? Mr. Porter.
Mr. LaBarbera,
Aye.
Mr. Connor,
Aye.
Mr. Weedman.
Aye.
I have a resolution authorizing a contract for the purchase, for the purchase of a 2020 Freightliner M2-106 truck.
Motion to approve?
I'll second. Any further discussion?
We're going for the state bid is 70,000.
Is it a-
70,000,
no.
over the 85,000, yeah. What he's doing is he's bidding.
No, those are two separate,
separate.
those are two separate things.
This
One's
is,
a truck, one's a-
this is the truck for $70,451. The other is everything that goes on the truck. It's actually more expensive than the truck.
Okay, yes.
We have a motion,
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion, Mr. Porter?
Mr. LaBarbera,
Aye.
Mr. Connor,
Aye.
Mr. Weedman.
Aye.
And then the equipment on the truck, which is the bed and all the plow and all the snow stuff. Resolution authorizing a contract for the purchase of equipment for installation on a 2020 Freightliner M2-106 truck.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Mr. Porter?
Mr. LaBarbera,
Aye.
Mr. Connor,
Aye.
Mr. Weedman.
Aye.
And then the next 2 resolutions were actually voted on at the workshop on Tuesday, but I was not happy with some of the language that was in there, so I think we should pass these or vote on these resolutions. The first one had some emergency language in there, and it did not pass unanimously, so it wouldn't be an emergency. The irony of that is it doesn't need to be an emergency anyway. That's a home rule situation, and this statute is not a home rule. The statute that we're dealing with here is not a home rule statute, any township can do it. So we didn't need the emergency language in the first place, but I would just like to clean it up. So, we have a resolution providing for and authorizing removal of vegetation, garbage, refuse, and other debris, and declaring a nuisance for the property located at 8671 Darnell Avenue, Sycamore Township, Ohio 45236.
Motion to approve.
Second? Any further discussion? Mr. Porter?
Mr. LaBarber?
Aye.
Mr. Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Weedman?
Aye.
You realize this is the one you voted no?
Yeah, I voted no on this and then, went through a whole bunch of paperwork from Mr. Bickford, and, I still think it's a neighbor problem that has got to be solved between the two neighbors.
So I think Greg said the same
And
thing.
I agree. I don't know how the debris got down there.
And then the same thing on the junk vehicle, a resolution providing for the removal of a junk vehicle in Sycamore Township, Hamilton County, and the proper disposal, storage, or impoundment of a motor vehicle by implementing the procedure set forth in Sycamore Township Resolution Number 2012-14 and Sections 505.173, 505.85, and 505.81 of the Ohio Revised Code.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Mr. Porter?
Mr. LaBarber?
Aye.
Mr. Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Weedman?
Aye.
I believe that's it.
Okay. Next is trustee comments. Any of the trustees have any further comments to make?
I have one comment. Given the complexity and the length of comments that have been made at this meeting, I would like to make a motion that we hire a transcriber to transcribe the minutes of this meeting to submit as the minutes for this evening on a one-time basis.
Is that a motion?
That is a motion, yes.
You talking about typing the tape?
From the audio?
Yes, transcribing the audio to use as the draft of the minutes for this meeting.
I'll second. Any further discussion?
I would discuss the fact that your basis for your whole conversation was not the meeting that I was referring to. It was the meeting where we had the workshop meeting where Mr. Porter was out of line.
There has been confusion over this for months, and
I
it keeps
know,
being
but
brought
you're going
up.
back, you asked everybody down this line about the Thursday night meeting. It wasn't about the workshop meeting that I was referencing, and it had been since April.
That's all the more reason why these minutes, if these minutes are gonna be accurate, I think we should have them transcribed verbatim
And my
this time.
corrections will be in this.
Everything that you said,
Everything that's
everything that
been
was
said
said in this meeting
tonight.
will be included in the minutes.
And I'll go with that.
That would be not including the public hearing that we had
Correct,
prior
yes.
to just at the
The
start
regular meeting,
of the regular meeting.
the regular meeting.
And that one line was agreed upon.
Everything
And
that was
if
said, it was said.
If
Yeah.
that was agreed upon in April, we would not be here talking about that.
All right. I had another question and I lost my train of thought, so go.
Okay. Is that all, Lenny?
Yeah.
Anything else?
Well, we have to vote on that if you're.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Porter?
Mr. LaBarber?
Aye.
Mr. Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Weedman?
Aye. No, my point that I wanted to make is in doing that, I don't know how long it may be before you get those from the transcriber, just so.
Then you might be done.
I'll
not gonna be
probably,
tomorrow.
I'll probably go to Pete. They did CIG, and they're still not done with CIG. Granted, this is a much shorter meeting, but unless.
Are you having CIG transcript?
Yes.
Yeah, we had CIG transcribed, yes.
Whole thing.
Okay.
We did.
No, we did.
Oh, we
ended
did?
up doing
Was
that
that us?
because
Okay.
both attorneys ended up wanting it. So I took it over, so it came from us, based on whatever happened with that case.
It's too late to do anything.
I understand.
All right. And anyway, my point being, it may not even be ready by the next meeting.
Sure.
Depending on their schedule.
Sure.
So,
I'll get with Doug, we'll get it to, Aceable or There's a couple of them out there.
Okay. Mr. LaBarbera, any trustee comments?
I may have some after you're done.
For the last 12 months, the two board members, our law director, and all of our administrative staff have been lectured by Mr. LaBarbera about transparency and how our township was not transparent. So tonight, I'd like to address the word transparency in my trustee comments. As I am sure Mr. LaBarbera would agree, the root of transparency is the truth. Let me repeat that. The root of transparency is the truth. So when one doesn't actually tell the truth, they're not being transparent, as I'm sure Mr. LaBarbera would agree. You heard a number of situations tonight during our minutes discussion where Mr. LaBarbera was clearly not telling the truth, and in turn, was not being transparent. But let's review a few things that Mr. LaBarbera said during the CIG hearings and identify if they were transparent or if they lacked the truth, which makes them not transparent. On the evening of October 18th, Mr. Bertoli pointed out that I had received a campaign contribution from Carriage Encore LLC. Mr. Mara said the contribution was received, and I quote, immediately after the election, end quote. Well, that certainly lacked transparency because it was very far from the truth. That check was dated October 17th, over 3 weeks before Election Day, and deposited on the afternoon of October 25th, 14 days before the election. I'll come back to that in a minute. While I already corrected that in my statement before deliberation, I want to go to the evening of November 13th. Mr. Fusero asked Mr. LaBarbera how much money he received from Dr. Soey in contributions, and Mr. LaBarbera replied, and I quote, I don't know if I got a contribution from him at all. I don't think I did, end quote. Let the record show that not only did Mr. LaBarbera receive contributions from Dr. Soey was his largest contributor to the tune of $6,005 in total contributions. Now, Mr. LaBarbera, I think you would agree that there is absolutely no way that you could have possibly been truthful when you said that, quote, I don't know if I got a contribution from him at all. I would say that this shows a premeditated lack of transparency on your part. You knew very well that night that you received contributions from Dr. Soey, yet you lied to everybody in the audience. Then later, in that line of discussion, you said, I had a little more than $10,000 for my whole campaign. In reviewing your campaign finance report, you didn't have a little more than $10,000 for the whole campaign. You actually reported total contributions of $23,726.46, or more than double the amount you stated in the public hearing. Mr. LaBarbera, I'm sure you wouldn't consider that to be truthful or transparent. I have 23 other examples of blatant lack of transparency on the part of Mr. LaBarbera, but I would like to point out just one more tonight, and I will save the rest for a more opportune time. Mr. LaBarbera, you made a big deal about the check I received from Carriage Encore LLC, believing the lies that Mr. Maris spotted on when that check was actually received. You probed Mr. Bertoli at the public hearing on the 18th of October with your quote, you're saying that Mr. Weedman got that contribution after our campaign? End of quote. You knew that wasn't true because I was told by someone at the Board of Elections that you came down there and got a copy of my campaign finance report within 5 minutes after you walked out of the building with it. You knew from reading my report that what Mr. Murrah and Mr. Bertoli were saying were totally false, yet you proceeded to ask that question. Mr. LaBarbera, it was clear that your question was an effort to deceive the good residents of Sycamore Township, trying to cast doubt on my integrity. Well, Mr. LaBarbera, I have a copy of your finance report. And for the record, you received a $1,000 check from Dr. Sohi, check number 8290 on November 20th, 2 weeks after the election. But the best is yet to come. 2 days later, on November 22nd, you took Dr. Sohi's $1,000 and another $1,000 from your campaign committee, and you paid yourself back personally a total of $2,000 to pay back a loan you made to the campaign. Dr. Soe gave you $1,000 after the election so you could repay yourself the loan you had to your committee, and you tell all these good folks that you quote, don't know if I got a contribution from him at all. This no longer qualifies as not being transparent and falls into the category of blatant deceit. Mr. LaBarbera, this township has been totally transparent long before you got here. We signed up for Ohio Checkbook before you arrived, and we would have done it over 2 years earlier if their system would have interfaced with our Bucks accounting system. Every property acquisition we made along Montgomery Road was posted in minutes with attached contracts and resolutions, and I know they were because in a previous meeting you admitted that is where you found the information on those properties. When we purchase a property like your favorite piece of the Taco Bell, we don't list that in our resolution as the Taco Bell property. But every property acquisition has a parcel number that is readily available on the county auditor's website. That is the legal identifying property number for the parcel of land. That is true transparency, and that was included in every single acquisition we made. I believe I demonstrated tonight that you don't practice what you preach, and you were right in your December objections when you said that, quote, we don't share the same definition of transparency. We don't. Your definition as demonstrated tonight is a fake and a fraud, and I want nothing to do with that type of deceit. I will save my remaining 22 examples for another day.
$10,000 contribution that came in the 20. It was a week or so before the election.
It was 3 weeks.
It was 2 weeks. It was less than that. I had the date. I don't have your paperwork here. And that was for $10,000 on a project that you knew was going to happen. And I could go back and state other things over the years where you were. The images paid for play in Sycamore Township were wide open for business. That's because of you. You've got to be the leader. You've got to be the big talk. Now, I'm going to make sure that everybody knows what the Paul Soe donations were. I wasn't sure because he did walk with me. We used his venue, his place. There's a thing called in-kind contributions, which you have not apparently ever listed on your financial report. So
Because I didn't have it. That's why.
Nobody's ever helped you out. And nobody's ever helped you out.
That's correct.
No gas money for anybody.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, I marked down everything. Lady gave us ice the day of the election. I put that down. I think $35 for somebody on that. $100 for Paul Soe's wife who cooked dinner for us one night. For his venue, I put $2,000 because we used his place. I could have put down $100 or $200. I valued that, and I overvalued it. As I talked to Deb Ackford down at the Board of Elections. You put that down, and I'm open. I put myself wide open, and you took a swing, but it wasn't $10,000 from a client that you knew was going to be coming right before us. And you did that, and you've done that over the years.
That's incorrect.
So that's not incorrect. I went
Mr.
back and
LaBarbera,
checked. That's all going to be on the transcript there.
Yeah.
But financial money from Dr. Soe, I think there were 2 checks, 1,000 once, and I think 200 or 400 or something like that.
It would be 500.
500. So $1,500 cash collected in contributions from you.
And that's why they call them in-kind contributions, because there are contributions to your campaign. Those are all included in contributions. If they weren't
Financial
contributions,
contribution was $1,500.
if they weren't contributions, then they would make it
About
as
$10,000. And okay, you're gonna play, and then you vote for it. No, and you have a tendency, you say, well, the transparency. I went with Dusty Rhodes over the property acquisitions that we had, the Taco Bell and those sites. There were attachments, and I went, when I was running for trustee, I went back and forth many times with Mr. Bickford because Debbie had to refer Mr. Bickford. I had to go to Mr. Bickford for any public records request at a certain point. I was not getting all the information. And a lot of that information, Mr. Bickford would later admit it, had attachments to it. They're still trying to clean up those records. But no, I pointed out in the meeting, and you never objected to it at that meeting, when I pointed out all the different things. I went right down the line of where we were not transparent. So don't hand me that thing about not being transparent. This township, the meetings were in that back room back there with the door closed. until sometimes 5 minutes after 9 o'clock, then the doors were open and there were 3 people sitting back there. You had been back there, the trustees were back there for 15, 20 minutes, you can look at the cars. And that, at least the image was maybe something was going on. So the doors were then open. When I became a trustee, we opened the door when we were back there. And we moved it in here and more transparent. Marcy Longenecker and the people in the trustee's office, the treasurer's office, were lack at the talk about being transparent. Because this township, in December, said we're gonna go on a higher checkbook. And what? It was December, November? Okay. November, December, and it was in I think the newsletter in December, when I got it, the fall newsletter, that you were going on this. And here I am, we're sitting around, it was, what, April, and nothing had been done. And you were compatible. So.
Anything else?
No, that's what I gave you example after example for the last, how many months, last year.
We received your lectures.
And, no, I took the lectures from Denny Connor from day one. You know, are you kidding me? So now you're sitting there, so it's,
Okay. So
but
that,
$10,000
is that anything else you got?
No, that's
okay. Bills and receipts, Mr. Porter.
Yeah, we had receipts of $586,759.90. Disbursements of $991,747.95. A complete listing of all receipts and disbursements is available in the office for your review.
Motion to approve.
Second. Mr. LaBarber seconded. Any further conversation? Mr. Porter?
Mr. LaBarber?
Aye.
Mr. Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Yes.
The announcements, the BZA meeting is canceled because of the lack of an agenda, and everything else is pretty much follows normal. We have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned.